The Melbourne Press Club recently welcomed Monash University journalism student Isabella Tilley as an intern. You're about to hear a podcast she recorded while at the club, looking back at this year's AFP raids on journalists, probing what they mean for the industry.
If you're a new journalist, you might have heard about police raiding reporters and be wondering what on earth is going on. I'm Isabella Tilley, and I've spent the last 3 weeks talking to lawyers, journalists and industry leaders to explore what happened to cause the raids and what they mean for the future of Australian journalism. In case you missed the news, on June 4th, 2019, the Australian Federal Police raided the home of Annika Smethurst, a News Corp journalist, over a story involving an alleged national security leak. The article in question revealed the federal government was considering spying on Australian citizens and had been published more than a year prior. The day after the raid on Annika, the AFP entered the Sydney headquarters of the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. They were carrying a warrant which gave them unprecedented powers to add, copy, delete or alter other data. Sifting through over 9,000 documents and emails, the AFP was on a hunt for leads on whistleblowers who leaked information to journalists Sam Clark and Dan Oakes. The information was published 2 years prior to the raid in the Afghan files, which detailed unlawful killings by Australian special forces. If the idea of federal police interfering with the press concerns you, you're not alone. The raids have drawn worldwide condemnation, including from renowned international human rights lawyer Amal Clooney.
All the reports compiled on the state of press freedom in the world today say the decline is not only limited to non-democracies, and so we have to be vigilant, and we also have to know that what happens in a country like Australia or the UK or the US will be looked at by every other leader in the world and potentially used as an excuse to clamp down even further on journalists.
The AFP didn't act on either case until 2 weeks after the 2019 federal election, by which point the stories were more than 1 and 2 years old. New opposition leader Anthony Albanese condemned the raids and the government's inaction.
Clearly, the government needs to show leadership on this issue. They have to point out what here was exposed that was inappropriate, that wasn't in the public interest. And clearly, the information, for example, that Annika Smethurst put out there, I believe, was in the public interest.
Meanwhile, Home Affairs Minister Peter Dutton, whose department oversees the AFP, defended the raids.
I think it's up to the police to investigate, to do it independently and make a decision about whether or not they prosecute. That's an issue for the police. These are laws that go back decades in Western democracies like ours, where if you've got top secret documents and they've been leaked, it is an offence under the law, and the police have an obligation to investigate a matter that was referred to them by the Defence Department, and they'll do that.
So what does press freedom really mean? There is an intimidating number of laws for a new journo to understand. Peter Bartlett is a partner of Minter Ellison and one of Australia's leading media lawyers. He explains what permitted the AFP to conduct the recent raids.
There are draconian sections in the Commonwealth Crimes Act which enable the Commonwealth, the AFP, to get search warrants. There's other legislation again on preventing bureaucrats from releasing material, and that enables the AFP and other authorities to get search warrants. Here, I think we had the News Limited reporter was deemed to have received material that she should not have received, and so the Commonwealth is after her source. And that's a real worry, not only for the reporter who can be prosecuted, but also for that source. And then the ABC, I think, their material that they published disclosed that they'd been leaked hundreds of secret documents. And as a result of that, the Commonwealth, the AFP, then sought a search warrant. In the ABC case, the AFP turned up on the doorstep. They insisted on having access to that material, the subject of the search warrant, and then they took all of that, removed all of that material. The ABC is going to court saying that they exceeded their authority, that no reasonable person should have issued that search warrant, and the search warrant should be set aside and the AFP should return those documents.
It's not clear whether the raids were intended to find information to prosecute whistleblowers, or if they were designed to intimidate and silence journalists. Award-winning investigative journalist and author Adele Ferguson.
I think it was to intimidate and to have a chilling effect on whistleblowers, to shut any would-be whistleblowers coming forward. But you really, I hope they're not prosecuted, the journalists, but, in this climate, who knows? So I wouldn't be confident, which is a terrible place to be.
Concern for the future of the industry is common among journalists and media watchers. Paul Murphy, CEO of the union, the Media, Entertainment and Arts Alliance, is no exception.
On one level, I was shocked that we'd got to this point, but I have to say on another level, I felt it was an inevitable result of the way that things have been happening in this country for some time. When you think about the fact that since September 11, 2001, there's been 75 pieces of national security legislation put through our parliament, which is more than any other country in the world, more than the US, more than the UK. It's been a complete overreaction in this country, and so many of the provisions impinge on basic democratic freedoms and a free press that it's created this climate and a culture within our police and intelligence agencies which led to the point that we saw of these raids.
Whistleblowers in Australia are at serious risk of prosecution, even when what they provide to the media is in the public interest. Peter Bartlett.
Well, we're in a very serious position with whistleblowers and sources. Number one, on sources, we do have shield laws in some of the states and territories and the Commonwealth, but they are reasonably weak, and they're inconsistent between states and territories. In this day and age where the state and territory borders are absolutely irrelevant to the media and to sources, there should be consistency in the shield laws between the states, territories and the Commonwealth. That needs to be addressed. Reporters are more exposed than they have ever been to surveillance by the authorities and to prosecution by the authorities. It's a very serious position that we're presently in.
Whistleblowers play an important role in exposing bad government and organisation behaviour, which would otherwise be masked by confidentiality agreements and classification.
Classification of documents is an issue that's become more important in recent years because some of the legislation that we've seen passed actually creates that whether or not a criminal offence has been committed is determined by the classification of the document. So a journalist is in innocent receipt of a document. If it's stamped top secret, then they face criminal charges. But the process for classifying those documents is not an independent process. It's an internal administrative process within government. And there needs to be independent oversight and review to prevent the overclassification of documents.
Whistleblowers and journalists seeking to expose important information have a very modern problem to deal with. Australian security agencies can access internet metadata, information which can show the websites you visited and the people you've contacted online without notice. This is of great concern to Peter Bartlett.
Well, that's a real problem because I think it's been revealed now that some 58 journalists had their metadata looked at by the authorities in the last 12 months. And that is pretty outrageous because those reporters had no idea that their material was being looked at. We have no idea whether it was actually justifiable, who authorised it, and that's a real problem. And you find now that investigative reporters aware of that have to go to extraordinary lengths to try and protect their sources. You tend to find these days that investigative reporters, some of them will resort to the old method of meeting a source in a secret place because they don't want to use technology. Others will try and resort to new technology, different apps that they can use, WhatsApp, for example. They do not like using the normal telephone. They do not like using email because they know that those that technology is so easy to be accessed.
Keeping metadata private and concealing the identity of whistleblowers may sound daunting, but knowing how to contact, debrief, and keep sources as safe as possible is crucial. According to Adele Ferguson.
Often it's sources that come to me. So it could be at a function, someone will come to me and then I will lay the groundwork for what they should do. If they ring up on the landline at work, there's no ID, so that is useful. A problem is if they email and they show that then is a trace. So what you try to do is go out there and tell people that they should try and meet you face to face, have a coffee, or use a phone that doesn't have an ID on it. What I do is I always try to use Proton Mail, which is an encrypted email system. So if you're talking to somebody who's thinking of sending you communication, if it's via email, use Proton Mail, or use Signal if you're doing voice or SMSs. It's the only way. Encrypted is the way to go, or face-to-face is even better. I always tell whistleblowers what they could be facing. So in many cases, I've dealt with a lot of whistleblowers over the years, and often they have come to me after they have gone internally. So they're already known to the company and they got nowhere, and that's when they come to the media. So that was the case with Jeff Morris from Commonwealth Bank Financial Planning. He went to ASIC, the corporate regulator, got nowhere, the company found out, and then he goes to the media. So really, it's all happened for him. It was the same with Richard Boyle, the ATO whistleblower. He had done the right thing and had lodged a public interest disclosure document, so they knew he was a whistleblower. Dr. Coe, the whistleblowers who survived are such as a National Australia Bank whistleblower who was anonymous. He came to me because he didn't trust the regulator and he didn't trust going internally. So that really is the best way forward. If you can try and anonymise yourself and go straight to someone you trust in the media, I believe that's the safest way forward.
Although the recent raids are shocking, they are definitely not the first to have affected journalists. Peter Bartlett has worked on one such case in the past.
There's a very interesting case that I was involved in many years ago, where the Commonwealth sought an injunction to stop Fairfax, Sydney Morning Herald and the Melbourne Age from publishing Defence Department documents. And there's a very interesting, impressive comment made by Mr Justice Mason in the High Court of Australia in relation to that case. And he said, it can scarcely be a relevant detriment to the government that publication of material concerning its actions will merely expose it to public discussion and criticism. And that is wholly relevant to the search warrant issued in relation to the News Limited reporter, because all her article did was expose the government to criticism and analysis. And so Mr Justice Mason would say that search warrant, I think, should not have been issued. In relation to the ABC, again, in that judgment, Mr Justice Mason said that simply because the government labels or stamps on a document top secret does not mean, in effect, it is top secret. And so that the court should look beyond that, and if all that it does is allow the public to see what the government is doing and to criticise the government and analyse what the government is doing, that is fine.
Don't let all this doom and gloom put you off becoming a journalist though. Paul, Adele and Peter all have advice for early career journalists concerned about their rights.
Join the union. Journalists really need to stand together to face these challenges. I think any young journalist entering the profession needs to be part of the broader community of journalists and be an active part of that community to share experiences, to share advice, to share tips, to stay on top of trends, particularly with technology around communication. I think that's absolutely critical.
An investigative reporter now has to be aware and fully aware of the risks that they face, so that they need to know that the authorities are watching. They need to assume that their phone is tapped. They need to assume that their emails are being monitored, and they need to take all steps possible to protect their sources to get those big stories out there. Because let's remember that basically every royal commission that this country has seen has been the result of wonderful work done by investigative reporters. And if those reporters are intimidated not to make those investigations, then the public won't know what they should be told, and it's a huge attack on freedom of speech.
I think journalism is one of the best careers you could ever have, and you just have to be really dogged and persist with trying to get in somewhere, no matter where it is, because you can make such change. But you really have to be dogged and determined, and then the world is your oyster. You can really get so much change for the better of society.
As for the future of the industry, it's not all bad news.
I like to try and be positive, so I'm hoping that this has really put it on the front agenda. So you've got CEOs of news corporations, coming together as one to try and put the case of journalists and whistleblowers forward. So like never before, it's in the spotlight, which is a positive. And we've got the world looking at us now, so I'm hoping that will put pressure to make it better for journalism.
I would be very surprised if they actually prosecute the reporters, and if they do, then it raises colossal freedom of speech issues. Freedom of speech issues that should be raised, because there's been a huge drop in freedom of speech in this country over recent years, and it is getting to a very serious stage.
I think it's certainly the case that the recent police raids have really brought this issue to public attention. I've felt in recent years it's been hard to grab the attention of the public to how serious a problem was developing in this country. I think the raids have brought that to public attention. We have got attention from Parliament at the moment, so you would like to be optimistic and hope that there will be improvements, but that's certainly not going to happen without continuing activism from journalists and media organisations to work, to push and to hold our Parliament to account.
Thank you for listening. I hope this piece has helped you get up to date and feel confident about your journalistic career. I'd also like to give a huge thanks to Peter Bartlett, Paul Murphy and Adele Ferguson.
To stay in the loop with the Melbourne Press Club and our young and early career journalist events, head to melbournepressclub.com and scroll down to sign up to our free email updates.